Okay, it's 6:41 a.m. where I find myself empirically. We are the 24th of October 2022, and I've just recorded a video about wisdom, and I intend to make another video about psychology. I will not explain what I think, who I think I am, everything, because I've made videos. I will begin by saying I made a video a few weeks ago that I intended to use as an introduction to my channel, because I've been frustrated whenever I stumble upon videos by YouTubers who talk randomly. They do not say what they think, where they talk from, etc. But I've tried to do this, and the introduction lasted more than 5 hours. So I'm not gonna implement a 5 hours long introduction before each of my videos. I've reached a point where I have tried to share what I call the idea. What is the idea, the totality of all logical determination, etc., etc., and the encyclopedic view and the phenomenology. I will not even explain. Now I share the links to the various channels, and I talk not randomly, because I know what I want to talk about, but I want to talk about psychology and trauma. I will put a link to a video that I've stumbled upon this morning about the channel Psych2Go. This is one I can add the channel. I've made precisely a document with all the links to all the people who participate in the mind of God, the totality, becoming conscious of itself, etc. But I will add maybe this in my personal list, because it's kind of helpful for those in need. So, about psychology and the experience of trauma. I've understood that I have to die eventually at some moment. We all have to die eventually. In the long run, we are all dead. It's kind of a scary and frightening prospect, but wisdom consists in trying to accept this this event, one might say. It might come. To learn to live with the prospect of death consists in saying one could die today, tomorrow, in the next few days, next week, in the next few months, eventually. For some people, I think in the next few years or few decades, but it comes at some moment. Yeah. And yeah. Yeah. And I want to talk about my own psyche, my psychology, as I understand this at this moment in time. Precisely, why do I do this? Not because I'm self-indulging in a narcissistic psychological introspection, although partly maybe I am, but to make my videos intelligible to those who might watch them, knowing that I have to repeat this. I've said this, and I said in most of my videos recently, that I become smarter every waking hour, and even every sleeping hour. So I constantly become smarter, which helped me look retrospectively on my own life or my own content in terms of expression, public expression on the internet, and to reinterpret more accurately with the new data or the new prospects, the new perspective that I adopt by gathering knowledge. And I can look back on my life. I've done this very often, but to understand more. So now I will talk about the trauma that I've experienced, so that it might help those who are interested in what I call my more serious videos, more philosophical, more systematic, more rational, etc., to understand, to connect the dots. And that's what I do in a way, because I grant myself as long as I can, when I eat, when I clean my room, when I rest, to listen to my own videos, and I've found kind of wisdom partly, or intelligence, good intelligence in my own videos, but now I try to provide a context. So here I have listed, I've done this this morning in a few minutes, the important defining moments, as I envision this now, in terms of traumatic experience, which I talk about my singular self, but it can be, that's what I talk about when I talk about the singular, the particular, the universal. You, the person watching this other than myself, I know that there are at least 5 or 6 persons who watch my videos. You can use your own intelligence that God gave you. Don't forget. That's a joke. When the people say they relate, they mean that the universal, which is being expressed in a singular case, or the particular, they can relate because they share the same particularity or the same universality with them. And usually people, they relate to the people who are most like them. That's why male channels usually talk to males, female channels usually talk to males as well if they are attractive. But depending on the content, it appeals to a certain type of audience. The makeup channel is mostly for women. The ASMR, it attracts males as well as females, because if the girl is attractive, it attracts males. Political channels, it attracts mostly males. Political content, it mostly for men. That's one of the reasons that precisely here I improvise. It's not that I improvise, simply that it's common sense, or maybe not, but the distinctions of feminism, the feminist ideology is kind of falling apart, because just by looking at the statistics, it's becoming self-evident that men and women have different types of interest. They can agree on certain. That's why precisely the ASMR channels, I don't know the statistics, but it attracts an audience, or the good music production, it attracts audience of both sexes, but otherwise it's becoming very clear that men and women, whatever their sociological influence, education, background, the ideology of their country, in terms of feminism or more traditionalism, they are attracted by the same kind of content. I mean, there are cultural differences and ethnic differences, obviously, but the gender dynamics, they are very important. That's why it's a refutation of the feminist ideology simply by looking at internet statistics. And the same goes here. When I was an accountant for a few weeks, a few months, when one has access to the sociological data of companies or businesses, it's so self-evident that people gather together in spite of the legislation which prevents them from doing so officially, but people gather together in corporations and businesses by ties of ethnicity. Just by, there are no, not necessarily ethnic data, but simply looking at the names. It's true for every country where there is a multicultural, diverse population. People can be recognized with a high degree of certainty by their name. Let us imagine in America or England or English-speaking countries with diversity, people can be identified with a very high degree of accuracy by their last name or their first name, and sometimes it vanishes after a few generations. For instance, De Niro or Pacino, well, it's clear that they are Italian Americans, but they are considered not Americans because they have been there for many generations. I don't know, but or the Americans. I think about the Americans with a German or Germanic name, or an English name. It derives from their ancestry. there can be misguided or misleading sometimes a person with an English-speaking, how should I explain? An English-sounding name can be Afro-American, precisely because of historical reasons. But usually, or someone with a strange name can be perfectly Anglo-Saxon in the case of the US. But it's the same in France, in Germany, in every country where there's multiculturalism. Probably in Brazil as well, in Singapore, I guess, in every country where there is important diversity. In South Africa, probably. Yeah. So, yeah, what I want to say is that someone with sociological intelligence, one might say, it can be identified just by looking at the names, the origin of the person, to notice that they gather together based on ties of ethnicity and ethnic ties. It's unconscious, it can be even illegal. It is in most modern democracies, precisely, that people are forced to unite together, but anyone with common sense might notice that in Chinese restaurant, usually there are mostly Chinese people, Chinese-looking people and genetically Chinese people, etc. In a Hispanic restaurant, there are usually Hispanics, although it's legally forbidden to hire people based on ethnicity, but yeah, and white people, they gather together as well, but it's covered. It's not because it's illegal, but they do this nonetheless, not with the intention of scheming, but they are spontaneously attracted by people who look like them, and there are unofficial gatherings of white people. Kevin MacDonald wrote about this, the NASCAR rallies or hockey in America. This is a gathering for white people. Ecological meetings, this is a way for white people to gather together. The Republican Party, churches, I know that in the US churches are very divided by ethnicity. It's not official because the message precisely is the complete opposite. We are all children of God, we're all equal, etc. But the people in the churches, they gather together. The same goes in every country, I guess, because it's sociobiologically determined. Yeah. Why was I saying this? Yeah, to identify people. So that's the kind of common sense reality which is validated by sociobiological knowledge. I mean, there's an explanation of why it is so, and it is also partly metaphysical. It can be explained. But the problem in modern Western society is the hypocrisy. Namely, we are not allowed, either for moral or legal reasons, to simply state the obvious, to say that this is how reality functions. And then there are counter-examples. The same goes with women. When we say men are more interested in politics and science than women are, there are now counter-examples. No, there is this female scientist, etc. But then common sense is to look at the statistics sometimes and to say that in the 98% of achievers in science are men in a historical perspective, and only 2% are women. Maybe there are reasons other than patriarchal, conspiracy, oppressive, whatever. It's partly true, but it's not sufficient. And the same goes with people who unite by ties of ethnicity, unconsciously or consciously. There are other reasons than racism, conspiracy, etc. It's simply that people are spontaneously attracted by others who look like them and who share the same background, etc., etc. And here I will give an anecdote. That's part of my new maybe method. When I'm in a good mood, I speak with anecdote, but it's in order to extract the universal out of the singular. There are Turkish people of German citizenship uniting for business with Turkish people of French citizenship. I know this from experience, precisely. Which means that the ethnic ties, and partly ethnocultural, because the Turkish ethnic identity is not purely genetic, it's a mixture of genetics, culture, religion as well, but it's partly anthropological. These ties they transcend the citizenship point of view. Namely, these people, they feel more closely related to people of Turkish origin from a different nationality in terms of citizenship than with their own fellow citizens from a nationality point of view. And it's universal, I guess, because it's sociobiologically determined. There can be counterexamples, but there are probably black persons in Canada who identify more with Afro-Americans than with, or maybe not, because then there are the historical Afro-Americans and the recent African immigrants, and they do not share the same history. The same goes for white people with historical Anglo-Saxons and the various tides of white immigration, Irish, Italian, Eastern European. Now it's people from Southeast Europe. When these are whites, I mean, that's complicated. But precisely, I speak ordinarily. Now, I could make a very detailed lecture on the underlying logical determinations, quantitative, particular versus particular, attraction, repulsion, continuity, discretion, etc. But I've made this. Now I will promote my videos. If you want the rational underlying structure, study logic, I will no longer give lectures on logic. Not in English, maybe in French, but not in English. I've already done this. So yeah, it's been 16 minutes. I want to make shorter videos. I am scheming in my head because I said to myself, if I make shorter videos where I talk ordinarily, people will watch my videos, maybe, because I've understood that in order to make videos successful, there has to be a relatable aspect. There has to be the proper measure. When I make 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours long video, people will not watch them spontaneously. So yeah, so I have to make shorter videos. I have to talk ordinarily. I have to relate, but not in a hypocritical sense. Really, I talk about my personal experience, but if I make the videos too long, people will not watch this. I have made videos. That's what I said in my previous video. I understand in real time my own psychological determinations. Why do I do what I do? What is my conscious intention? What are the outcomes, etc., etc. I am self-critical in the sense of self-reflection, self-analysis in real time. I can. That's a problem, maybe not, but it can be a problem because of an excess of intelligence, in the sense that I have never studied psychology in a textbook, or I have books about psychology, but I haven't studied them. But simply by experience and by listening to people, and I can read most other people's minds, mostly white people, non-whites as well, but I understand the psyche of others because I understand my own psyche. Yeah. Here I will talk seriously for a few minutes. That's a fundamental problem, because that's where the blessing and the curse, the problem and the solution coincide in a way. And they talk about this in The Simpsons. alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems, Katy Perry, Poison, Britney Spears, Eva Max, E.T. by Katy Perry, Toxic by Britney, and So Am I by Ava Max. They talk in pop culture about Tainted Love by Marilyn Manson. It's a gift. Here we're not talking about love. We're talking about something which is considered usually positive, namely the ability to read the mind of others and to understand others. It can be a blessing, but also a curse, because to understand the others and to understand oneself, it's liberating. It brings kind of joy. That's Spinozian psychology, here in the realm of psychology, or in every aspect. That's Spinozian philosophy, namely, I've been spontaneously attracted by Spinoza. I was probably determined by the substance. That's a joke for philosophers. But no, seriously. The philosophy of Spinoza is simply finding peace through understanding. It's a cognitive process of understanding reality and to find satisfaction and joy in understanding why things are the way they are. And it's kind of liberating and it can bring joy indeed, but there comes a moment when understanding oneself or the other, thank God, there are still mysteries to be solved. But that's very serious in a sense that here it's really serious. Being stupid or limited cognitively, stupid can be quantitative, low intelligence, namely to have a low IQ, but then I'm smart enough to know that people with low IQ, they can be smart in a different way, social intelligence, social skills, etc., etc. But what I say stupid here, it can either mean low IQ, low quantitative determination of intelligence, it can be measured, or being an idiot, no matter what the IQ is. And it can be, or to be ignorant, to be kind of an idiot is kind of it's not a sin, precisely because the idiots are innocent, but it's negative. Whereas being ignorant, it can be positive. It can be because of lack of opportunity to study, or lack of leisure, or because lack of it's not derogatory, but to be limited intellectually, whatever the cause, low IQ, stupidity, ignorance in a neutral way, can be a blessing because it enables one to always improve and to have the opportunity to become smarter in terms of wiser or more knowledgeable. There is being smart, being wise, and being knowledgeable. These are distinctions. Smart people are not always wise. They are not always knowledgeable. This is what I talk about when I blame the Anglo-Saxons. For me, the Anglo-Saxons, they are very smart, obviously, but from a European, a culturally European perspective, they are kind of ignorant in a derogatory sense. Very ignorant, these Anglo-Saxons. They have no culture. That's a joke. I'm smart enough to know that if there's a people who has a culture, the Anglo-Saxons, yeah, but the typical white American is looked down upon by cultural Europeans as no culture, these people. I understand why, which of course most of what I've said in my videos consistently that precisely that's not true. I mean, that's not true on a collective level. That's completely stupid to say that white Americans have no culture, but on an individual level, it's empirically valid that many white Americans are culturally and have been culturally deprived. Yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, so it can be a blessing because it enables one to become knowledgeable and smart and intelligent and eventually wise from a cognitive, philosophical standpoint, but it's also a curse to understand the other. So yeah, being stupid or intelligent, in ordinary sense, all the layers, whatever the meaning, lack of, I will not re-explain, but being limited or not in terms of quantitative increase of intelligence. It can be a curse or a blessing, because to be deprived intellectually can be considered a curse, but it's also an opportunity to become smart. And to become smart, to be smart can be considered a blessing, because it enables to understand, etc., to make the right decisions eventually. But it's also a curse, because it's not that it enables it, that it forces, in a way. I can't help but understand a lot of others psychologically, to read them, read you like a magazine, as a Taylor says, in a blank space. Very inspired, Mrs. Swift. Very inspired. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so it can be it's not that it's partly a curse, because when a certain quantitative measure of intelligence, in the sense of ability to understand the other, is transcended, the others can be read through very easily. And it's kind of joyful, because yeah, but it's also a problem, because I know why. It's the reason why I do not speak is not because I don't know what to say. It's simply because most people, the overwhelming majority of humans, are simple-minded in terms of psychology. And in this sense, here it's my negative aristocratic self, as I call this. There are very few human beings who are really genuinely interesting psychologically. And of course, these are considered to be the best, usually artists, more than artists, writers, the great novel writers. I think here about Stendhal and Dostoevsky, spontaneously, in terms of the depth of the psychology. Great novelists, they are great psychologists. But they are also tormented in a way. Dostoevsky was more tormented than Stendhal, but that's why I've understood. How should I explain this? But in modern pop culture, Eminem is in a way fascinating, because he's such a profound figure, profound individual. But that this means profound here means to dig deep within oneself, and it implies suffering. That's why here I will express myself as intelligibly as I can. I have acquired through growing intellectually and maturing the ability to read people, literally. I mean, not literally precisely, but to read people. But when I was, I never thought I would say that. When I was younger, I was attracted by prestigious writers like Dostoevsky and Hemingway, Steinbeck, etc., and Nietzsche in terms of philosophy, for the purpose of, not the purpose, for the sake of a snob mentality, unconsciously, namely, I wanted to, that's psychological introspection. I knew myself, I felt downgraded because I had no diploma, no degree, etc., and I wanted unconsciously to acquire a status, and I thought I will study or read the great writers, the great novelists, the great philosophers, to compensate my sense of lack of self-worth in terms of, for me, worth unconsciously was intellectual standards, in a way. That's what drove me towards these writers. Unconsciously, I had no clue what I was driven by. But now I look back retrospectively, and I know that there are people. I know this from having watched The Sopranos, who watch. Usually, these are bourgeois people who listen to listen to great music or read great works of literature for the sake of maintaining their social reputation within their circle. That's sociological narcissism, in a way. That's people living in a sociological group, and they try to adopt the standards of their own group, and that's kind of fake. In my social circles, people they read the most recent Japanese literature. I have to read the same to be accepted by the group, or that's kind of exotic. I mean, exotic. I mean, Japan is not an exotic country, but it can be, the kind of the white leftist in the high sociological circles in the entire Western world. They say, the recent trend, I have to read this book or to promote this artist because my friends, etc. That's just psychological competition, acquire status. That's basic sociological determinism, namely to like what the others like within the group that one seeks to either to maintain the position within the group, to be recognized by the other, to assert the status, to be promoted by the group. This is sociological determinism. And in this sense, there are many intelligent people who feel they have a need, for the sake of maintaining their reputation or to acquire a reputation, to appreciate this author, etc., etc., out of sociological duty, one might say. And unconsciously, that's what I did when I was younger. I have to read Nietzsche because Nietzsche is so cool. That's what the young people think. But old people as well, and those between young and old as well. Nietzsche is always cool. No, maybe not. I don't know. No, but precisely because Nietzsche is very malleable. He's not to be. That's why. Whatever. That's why a scholarly study of Nietzsche is one of the most ludicrous ideas one can think of. But I don't blame people because I've done. But I've not done a scholarly study of Nietzsche, but I've done this of Hegel maybe. But what I want to say is that, so there is this psychosociological tendency that and the same goes for every sociological group. People feel that they are forced to love or to appreciate this kind of reference, cultural reference, because it enables them, they think, to assert their status within the group or to gain status, to enter a new group. That's basic sociology. And then people, they assert their identity in a different way. That's the negative, by rejecting the moral standards, not in terms of morality, but the cultural standards of their own sociological group, or the one they want to belong to, or etc., for the sake of asserting their identity. That's the logic of identity and difference. The example that I have is teenagers who play video games. They say, this game that everyone likes, I don't like this game. That's a way of asserting their identity. They differentiate themselves from the standards of the group that they think they belong to. But the same goes for people of all classes, all ages. I don't like this author, or I don't like this politician, I don't like this historical figure because, etc. That's what to assert one's identity means, to differentiate oneself. That's why they are conceptually, logically united. And about novelist, novelist. Yeah. So it begins for most people as just I have to read this book or listen to this artist or watch this movie or etc. This cultural reference for the sake of asserting my social status. It begins very early for young early teenagers who just want the clothes or the shoes or the jewelry or the whatever sign of external belonging, just to join the group. But then it develops in the teenage years when people start to think more intelligently, I don't know, and it develops during adult age and until very late, I don't know. But what I can do now is to look back on my intellectual path and to realize that actually the authors that I was spontaneously attracted to, namely Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Stendhal, Steinbeck, Hemingway, I was attracted by a snob mentality. Namely, snob here means the one who wants to appropriate the cultural standards of the group which is higher than his own group in terms of sociology. Or it can be ethnography, namely the people who admire some white people because usually they are black, who wants to be accepted within white society. Unconsciously they adopt the standards of white people, but now it has reversed. Now these are white people who adopt the standards of black because of a process of ethnomasochism. So now one has to, white lefty, they have to admire black heroes, Indian heroes, Asian heroes, Muslim heroes, etc. Everyone but their own. So that it has reversed historically over the past few decades in a chronological perspective. I could make a logical lecture about this. There were blacks who admired whites, then whites who admired blacks, blacks who admire blacks. This is what we find in modern cultural expression where a black identity is being asserted. So there are the three out of the four moments, but there is no longer white admiring white. So it began here. White admiring white, this was a common sense in the 19th century. Then blacks and non-whites admiring whites because of the standards of whites, that's the second moment. Then whites encouraging non-whites to assert themselves, that's non-whites admiring themselves, that's the nationalist figures of independence or assertion of black identity or Indian independence, etc. Gandhi, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, in various ways, because they did not always struggle for their own specific ethnic group. Sometimes it went beyond, but I simplify the figures of independence. It began already in the 19th century with independence in some Southern American countries, black independence within society, assertion of non-white identity. So that's the third moment. Then there is the fourth moment, maybe these are white admiring the identity of others. It has begun a few decades ago in the chronological perspective, and it has become more intensified. And now, white people, they are kind of forced to belong to their own sociological ethnographic group, namely to belong within white circles of high bourgeois class, or the ideological aristocracy in the Western countries. Whites are forced to admire non-whites. Gandhi, that's for students in the Western world. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, etc., etc. And then, depending on the political stance, it's more radical. Sankara, Malcolm X, Maduro, Morales, etc., etc. Every time there's a non-white figure who asserts the interest of his own ethnic group, whites are kind of forced to admire him. And now the return to the beginning is to say, okay, now maybe whites can find satisfaction in admiration, or at least approval of at least some aspects of their own history. But when they do this, and then they also know, I understand, non-whites who have come into Western societies and have adapted to society, adopted the standards, cultural values, etc., and who de facto, because they are intern, they admire the standards of some white people in terms of science, politics, etc., not because they are white, but because they are good in terms of, I don't know, the scientists, the physicists, the politicians, the economists, simply the standards in terms of achievement. So these non-whites who have become westernized, they admire good white people, but not because they are white, but because they are good. And they are being accused by some others of being kind of traitors, either by white leftists or by non-white identitarians. And then there are the whites who like to assert themselves, but it can be translated in logical categories, but I won't do this because it would be too long. So what I wanted to say is, the great novelist, it begins with the snob mentality, namely the wish to adopt the standards of the group with which one wishes to identify. It works universally. But then, when one grows older and maybe more intelligent and more mature intellectually, one realizes that these people, there really is a reason why they are admired. It's not just snob mentality, although it is for most people. That's my aristocratic derogatory, in the derogatory sense of others, but actually Stendhal or Novalis, Novalis as a poet, but he's not very well known, but Dostoevsky or the great American writers, Hawthorne, Steinbeck and Hemingway, the great English poets, the great French poets, the great German writers. There is a reason why they are admired by the snob mentality. It's because those who really have cultural standards, they really understand the depth and the profound and the insights of these people. And it's connected with what I said earlier. Basically, there comes a moment in intellectual development where there are fewer and fewer people who are genuinely interesting, and this comes with the aristocratic mentality, which is kind of Evola, Nietzsche, who tend to look down on others, but not in the resentful way, but simply we are beyond and let's talk about Evola. Precisely, the snob mentality. In the right-wing traditionalist circles, there are a lot of people who are attracted by Evola out of a sense of, I want to belong to whatever the traditionalist community, so I will read Evola. But that's snob mentality. That's basic sociology. If you are attracted by Evola out of a sense of sociological attempt to upgrade your status, that's wrong. The same goes with Nietzsche. It's the wrong reason for finding the right thinker, maybe. And the same goes with Zizek. People who are attracted by Zizek because he makes good jokes, that's the wrong reason for being attracted by the right person. The opposite would be the right reason to be attracted by the wrong person, maybe. But then if there's a right reason to be attracted, it's not the wrong person. Not completely. I will speak seriously. I know myself to be partly a monster, but I try to cure myself, and I know that I am partly a monster because the definition is statistical rarity, in a way. Scarcity. It's rare. It's someone in biology or in it's just the definition is an individual which is disconnected from the statistical distribution. That's why very ugly people, they are considered monsters physically, because very ugly people, they are statistically very improbable. But monster can be for good, in a sense of a high achiever or a worker or a creative artist. It's also a statistical monster. Yeah. This is the origin of the term. And I know that I am partly a monster for statistical reasons, simply because I have lived disconnected and I have read very intelligent authors, or not read, but with a very high IQ. I have developed my intelligence all alone. This is what explains my views on many topics which are out of the ordinary. And what I'm about to say is kind of negative, but not in a moral sense, is that I am partly a monster with no morally negative connotation in this sense, because sometimes when I'm honest, I am willing to acknowledge that Eminem and Lady Gaga, or Jordan Peterson, or Zizek, they suffer more than most other people, which is kind of a statement which is probably misunderstood, but at this point really I don't care, because I know this is partly the truth, or maybe the real truth. They are famous, they are rich, they are admired, they are good looking. You are good looking, Mr. Peterson. You are very wise. I've said things about you that I might regret. No, but I respect you, Mr. Peterson. But precisely, I understand that these people, they really suffer. And in this sense, I am not a materialist in the ordinary sense, because of course the person who is, of course I'm intelligent enough to understand it, the person who is deprived from the basic requirements in a sufficient amount of healthy food, clean water, hygiene, comfort, etc. Of course these persons, and there are billions, they suffer, but that's part of my monster aspect in terms of detachment, intellectual detachment, is that someone like Zizek or Peterson or Eminem or Lady Gaga, they suffer differently. Obviously they do not suffer from material deprivation, but they suffer from inner torment, and paradoxically it's easier to cure these people, Marshall, Stephanie, Slavoj, and Jordan, by explaining what they suffer from, than to cure the suffering of the countless millions or billions of others, because it would require to implement economic policies, etc. But of course, in a way, it's more easy, but of course, when the material conditions of life become really difficult and harsh, it produces suffering, physical suffering, which can lead to torment. But I am willingly embracing asceticism. I am detaching myself from material attachment in terms of comfort, pleasure, etc. But there are the excesses of self-mutilation. Well, they can be pleasant for the masochist, which I partly am, but I know it's a trap, because I've understood Nietzsche, but it's a trap which might be enjoyable. But in this sense, of course, I've never been in the position of a person who has to live with $1 per day and who is on the verge of starvation, and etc., etc. And from their perspective, their suffering is much more prevalent and much more real than the psychological torment of Zizek or Peterson, etc. But precisely being what I am implies that I understand more the suffering of the thinkers and the poets and the artists than that of the people, the ordinary people. That's why I'm evil. That's an aspect of my evil, is that I have disdain, which I know now I'm starting to become smart. I have disdain for the ordinary problems of the people in terms of wealth, etc., etc. But I'm intelligent enough to understand that it's because I've been privileged economically. That's my Buddha aspect, the Buddha who was too wealthy, and then he maybe went on a path towards a self-mortification, I don't know, and then he found peace and enlightenment. But I will conclude. One of my problems is that I understand the world and myself, partly, so fast that I am very self-critical, and I understand all my errors. Not all of them, but most of my errors. Here I will say I've made lectures on ethics on this channel, Eternal Light. I've never studied ethics theoretically. I've never read Kant thoroughly, or Plato, or Mill, or the Stoics, etc. But in a way I can be very dumb, but in a way I'm smart enough when I'm kind of honest to understand that making a lecture about ethics is already self-defeating, because the purpose of ethics is not to talk about this, but to apply ethics. That's why I'm so negative, because and here I will be honest with myself. This is why I suffer internally, one might say, because I suffer from a lack of self-worth, because I know that I could make great lectures on ethics without having had any formal education. I could comment Kant and the great Mill, the great ethical thinkers of the Western tradition or the Eastern tradition, but whenever I do this or think about doing this, and I have already partly in some of my videos, I immediately think, but it's not ethical to talk about ethics. So in a way I'm super ethical, which makes me morally bankrupt, partly. So when I talk about ethics, I feel guilty for talking and not acting, which makes me feel guilty, and I feel remorse, shame, guilt. For doing what most people would consider good. And about the snob mentality, well, I do not feel guilty because it's not really that bad, but just to be attracted by something for the sake of trying to please others that I care about, but that's the sociological game. I already feel kind of guilt, in the sense that I understand. I feel guilty when I am selfish, and I feel guilty when I do things to try to please others. Whatever I do, I feel guilty. But here's when I use Nietzsche, really in a good sense. Well, I will stop the video now and I will clean my room.